Welcome to the Intercut podcast channel, the weekly place to hear the latest on movies, TV, and entertainment that people can't cut away from. I'm your co-host, Zachary Shevich, and joining me, buying supplies for his doomsday shelter, it's Arturo Zurita.
Luckily, I already have all the leftovers from the last doomsday, so we're set to go, Zach, whenever you need to come over.
Yeah, well, what are the things that are your like shelter essentials? Do you just want like the basic canned goods and water? Do you need to get like the Nintendo Switch down there? What do you need at the end of the world?
Compressed coffee beans. I've got all my media that has been saved. You know, the thing that I feel like people forget, and I know this isn't really going to answer it, but this idea of getting all of your physical media is one thing.
Right.
But I think you need it digitized also. Like, I don't think they realize that the next step isn't like, you know, the digital cloud code on Voodoo. The next step is like, I don't have it on your hard drive. Rip that. Rip it.
Exactly.
Like, there's no other way.
We're long past the age of like desert island discs. Now it's your
Honestly.
desert island terabyte drive, right?
Yeah, you can't have a disc and then the player and the TV. You're gonna need that all in one computer ready to go, right? And that's why this video is sponsored you. I don't know. I think they need to condense it a little bit more. You can't have a whole thing of DVDs, but nonetheless, hey, it's good to know that the president wants you to download your stuff, even though he's the one with the deal on Netflix.
Yeah, well, President Obama is one of the people who helped bring us Leave the World Behind, the new Netflix original thriller from writer-director Sam Esmail, who many know for his work on the excellent series Mr. Robot, as well as the Homecoming series, which also starred Julia Roberts. The two of them reunite alongside Ethan Hawke, Mahershala Ali, and Myha'la, who apparently is going by a mononym now, which that's cool. Good for her.
Really?
For a film about what happens after communication breaks down in modern society. Roberts and Hawke play a married couple with two kids who book an idyllic rental getaway home when two strangers, played by Mahershala and Myha'la, knock on their front door. The movie plays on our reliance on technology, our fears about the world around us, and our helplessness in the face of existential dangers once the safeguards of law and order aren't there to protect us. But as enticing as I found several sequences in this movie, I was ultimately left with the feeling that it didn't really amount to a whole lot more than the sum of its parts. But Arturo, were you left as ambivalent on Leave the World Behind as I was?
Yes, it's one of those movies that when you tell people that you're not going to know what it's about by the end of it, and they groan at you, and then you're supposed to like tell them, but that's kind of the point, and they're like, okay, I think we all kind of know that. I think we're beyond this joke of, or the pitch that, you know, we're all just kind of sucked into our phones, into entertainment. We are all the little girl in this movie. I think we know that. Entertain us. I think that's where people at, and I think that's the pushback in this movie, is that you're almost hitting people over the head who have already gone through a pandemic, who have already gone through their own little turmoils on a daily basis. They don't need to be told, isn't it crazy? They're like, we're all stuck on our phones. We're going to present this to you on Netflix, where you've seen Black Mirror.
A lot of people made fun of the premise of the upcoming Ruben Östlund movie when that first leaked out, because apparently the idea is it's takes place on an international flight when the Wi-Fi goes out, and like how that's like the worst first world problem that anybody could have.
That's
but
funny.
Like it's sort of it's kind of like an extension of that idea in this movie. It's sort of like people don't know what to do without cell phone coverage, and like there's an interesting element to that too. I think it's interesting to see that like once sort of your base level idea of like security is gone, how do you respond to that? And I just don't know if the film ever really delved that deeply into like the human psyche or whatever. I think so much of this movie kind of takes place in the immediate aftermath of whatever's going on that like we don't really get too much to like the de-evolution of human behavior and like what happens when people get pushed up and against the corner. And I think maybe that's part of what I was missing from this movie. It feels like a movie that missed that third act where things really get serious. Not that like things aren't serious in the movie, but it just feels the threat maybe feels a little bit distant from how it's presented to our characters. And I don't know. I guess I wanted to dive a little bit more deeply into the ideas being explored.
What humans? After the beach scene, there ain't nobody there.
Yeah. They're so isolated.
Like, no, there would have been people there. I was able to run through the book, right? And I'll say that, for starters, the Rumaan Alam one's going to be dope because what I like about him isn't necessarily the, like, situation. It's how the characters react to it, like you were saying. Two, I do find things in this movie really interesting. I think the ideas, you know, it's just we've heard them a lot before. I don't think he takes a different swing at them. I still found the movie fascinating in aspects, but getting into that idea of like how characters react, I feel like they're all meant to react in the way that the author and the director wanted them to say something. And it almost felt like, I don't know, there were like moments where in the book where they're talking about kind of like the classes that Julia Roberts and her husband have compared to Mahershala's character who comes in. They have like a little bit more of a dynamic going on other than, I don't think you'd be able to own this house. Like, I felt
exactly.
Like it all came down to like microaggressions when it came to them. And I feel really bad because like you're saying with Myha'la's character, that's kind of like she killed an industry, bodies, but like it's almost like typecasting this idea of what this girl could be because it was
her character
way more
is snarky
fascinating.
millennial and not much more than that.
Every single time, and she kills it. She's really good at it. But I think it's the way that they set up a lot of the scenes compared to what was happening in the book that we'll get a little bit further into that I think took it back a lot. But yeah, where were the people, man? I think that was the one thing that was missing from it is this destruction. It's how people turn on each other, and it was very selected. You know, it's these two families, and then there's that one guy who made an appearance, like Kevin Bacon, which was also interesting because I know a big inspiration for the movie was 6 Degrees of Separation. I don't know if you've ever seen the Will Smith one. I caught it like a long time ago. Same thing. Knock that happens on the door. And then you kind of have like this play on 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon. This man, Sam Esmail, has always done this. I don't know if you remember for Homecoming. He took, for every single episode of the first season, like 5 or 6 iconic soundtracks to movies.
Yeah, he was repurposing a lot of like classic film scores, but for the show, which I thought was really, really well done in Homecoming. Yeah.
I feel like he snuck a lot of that into this movie as well.
Yeah, like the Friends DVDs, the quotes from The West Wing, some of the song choices as well.
Yeah, but I wonder how much of it is also like in the background, right? Because even like, you know, big names. We know Teslas. We know they did not get the, what's it called?
Permission
rights, I guess, to do the Teslas.
Rights.
There's a phone scene that happens, and out of all of them, it's the Washington Post that gets all gibberishy. And if you don't know who owns the Washington Post, go search up who owns the Washington Post. So there's all these different like subs that he takes, sometimes overtly, but a lot of times I think it's subconsciously in the background. One of the things that I caught the second time around is a lot of the paintings around the house. I don't know if you noticed that they would change. And there was moments, especially when they're in the upstairs bedroom, they have like a mural, a painting, technically of an ocean, and the sea rises after every chapter because the movie's divided into chapters, and every time you go back to them upstairs, it changes and it gets higher and higher. And I was like, okay, so you're doing a lot of these subliminal things in the background, right? The little girl's not wearing NASA for no reason. The son wearing Obey. I Googled that and I was like, okay, let me remember. I know Obey was kind of in the news
what is
a little
that,
bit ago.
Shepard Fairey? Yeah.
Yeah. The guy who made Obama's
co-posters. Yeah, exactly.
So I'm like, I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of intertwined. The man made Homecoming, like you mentioned earlier, and that's a show about reprogramming soldiers that are coming back home with a lot of various techniques.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of that is in this movie. For those who like watch a bunch of stuff that comes out of Hollywood and goes, this is, what is it, selective programming or whatever they yell? Kind of is that the movie?
Yeah, so Leave the World Behind was shot by Todd Campbell, who's worked with Esmail on Mr. Robot and some other projects, and they incorporate a lot of the like skewed angles that sort of defined the look of that show. I don't know if it's like full Dutch, but like the kind of tilted camera work. But there's also a lot of like really ominous crane shots, and to me that almost gave me that same feeling of like Big Brother watching over these characters, and they're just like these little peons in this like greater global conflict. But aside from, as you mentioned, like those subliminal elements or production design details, like I think as you were also mentioning, like this movie maybe gets a little bit more bogged down in some of those like microaggressions and like the politics of being like a liberal person in a wealthy suburban neighborhood or whatever that is. And when like maybe that would be interesting more as like the subtext of what's going on rather than the text, because like I think when you are faced with this kind of like potential globe ending deal, that's got to be the text, right?
For a lot of people, especially if that's the way you're selling the movie, I would definitely argue that. I think that in the book it does play it a little bit better. For getting into more spoilers, the idea of, you know, what is the family's name? I don't know if they have a last name, but Amanda and Clay.
Yeah,
right?
Amanda and Clay. Yeah.
When they leave, they're supposed to be like middle class. And they just want to get out of town. They go and they rent this place. But then GH, if I'm not mistaken, and his daughter Ruth appear because they kind of need a place to go after everything's kind of, you know, gone to chaos.
Yeah.
They're a lot older in the book. So it's not just that the way that they present it is less interesting in the movie. It's a little bit more cohesive in the way that it's written, just not not the way that he directed the performances. Because with them being older in the book, you also have Ruth not being his daughter. You have Ruth being his wife.
Oh, okay.
Bro, that's a completely different dynamic, right?
Yeah,
so
very
now
different.
you don't have this young girl who's, oh my gosh, the pot calling the kettle black. Exit scene. You don't have a lot of these scenes that are like, oh yeah, no, we've known this. Get Out came out years ago. That was probably the climax, the peak of how to put microaggressions in a movie. In the book, you have this idea of these classes that are almost like fighting with each other because they're just like right there, you know, they're on that Saltburn edge. And when they meet these people, the only reason that they kind of like are okay with them is, as you know, GH puts it early on, this is our home. Look, I got the keys, I got everything. What if I give you $1,000? That gets the husband to go like, okay, I'm going to get something out of this. What really gets the wife to turn around in the book is when they realize that they're also an admissions counselor. And she's got kids. So it's this push and pull of what you can give and take that to me is way more fascinating than, are we sure this is their house?
Yeah.
Are we not going to get looted? Like
they're black, but this is a really nice home. That doesn't sit right with
Come on, bro. Yeah, the Philharmonic, are we sure? I feel like it's such a reductive take on what the book was already giving you.
Yeah, and maybe that's something that, because it's a book and you can maybe get into the heads of the characters a little bit better with like a longer text like that, it's able to tackle those things well. I know for one thing, like, even though I had some misgivings with the movie, it did make me more interested in reading the book because there is a really fascinating story being told. So I'm glad it's got your recommendation. I'll probably check that out soon. But
I like the themes of the story, but it's very vulgar.
Is it?
I will give it that.
I'm
there's a lot more sex in the book.
Ooh, all right, because it's maybe the only more hinted at in the movie, the sex. But
and I'll say I like the way it was hinted in the movie. It was very sensual.
Yeah. There are also a lot of elements of disaster movies in this that I think actually work really well. I'm not sure that I've ever seen anything quite like that sequence with the oil tanker near the start of the film, like very much like a natural disaster kind of vibe. I don't know if there was a particular sequence that stood out to you, whether it was that one or the stuff with the autonomous cars.
I think that was the coolest one. I've been calling that one Tesla's Tetris. I thought that was a pretty funny scene. I especially like how she does like the inside Children of Men shot where it's kind of like moving inside the car as you're trying to duke it out. I think that would be my number one. There was two like plane scenes, right? One was the drone-ish type thing that's dropping all the letters.
Yes.
That Ethan Hawke drives away from.
And then there's the one with Mahershala Ali,
where they do like the vertigo
kind of
shot,
similar almost at the exact same time.
Very close to each other. So it's like both of those were pretty cool. But I'd have to give it to the Tesla one. I think it's very overt what they're trying to comment on. I don't think that many white Teslas, like not even one different one.
I mean, if anything, that could be a commentary on the lack of color in modern design. I don't know if you've seen all those trends going on, but yeah.
I mean, even the boat said White Lion.
Right. Yeah. I mean, look, that's a theme,
the first slave
a running theme in it for sure. A motif, maybe.
Yeah.
All right, so we should maybe dive more explicitly into spoilers because it's hard to talk about this movie without doing that. But just a quick reminder before we do, if you are enjoying this review on YouTube, like the video, leave us a comment letting us know what you think. Consider subscribing to our channel, or if you're listening, you can subscribe on Apple, Spotify, whatever you use for podcatchers. Also, make sure you leave us a 5-star review there. We really appreciate it. It's a great way to support the show. And you can also support us for as little as $1 a month by heading over to patreon.com/intercutpod to help ensure we keep doing reviews, deep dives, movie brackets, film festival coverage. We got Sundance coming up. And, of course, our best movies of the year list, because those are very close to happening. We actually are in our final stretch of getting some movies in. So, yeah.
This one making it?
Right. We're doing it. We got a week left, right?
Is this one making it?
I don't know if this was going to make my list personally.
No category.
You know what? I'm working on a personal top 100, and I think it's in contention for that. I'll give it that much. By the way, shout out to our awesome patrons for their continued support of the show. But let's dive into the spoilers with the idea that Leave the World Behind tries to sort of keep you guessing, both for what is actually happening in the world around them, as well as whatever secret motivation some of its characters may have. Was it enough to keep you interested? Did you find yourself growing tired of waiting for the answer? And did you actually feel like the answers ultimately led to a good payoff?
Thematically, yes. As an apocalyptic movie where you're trying to figure out what started it all, like The Walking Dead, what is that virus?
Right.
Half. I don't know what theory you got out of it, because obviously they leave it open-ended, and I knew right away. I'm like, they're not going to answer this. They're not going to wrap it up in a bow. It's 2.5 hours, and yet we're spending a lot of time focusing on other things. But it is Sam Esmail, and I thought he left enough clues there. We're talking about a lot of the thematic threads that are left with the production design and Easter eggs. But I also kind of have some theories on what I think was happening. I think they kind of showcase different models of what could have happened. They do have one massive through line, which is clearly, no matter who it was, the idea is to destabilize the country, get people to panic, to turn in on each other, and then that is what brings the country down, is having no information. We have misinformation right now, but where's that misinformation? I truly do believe this is no information. Like,
exactly,
at least there's a lot of clutter, but you can maybe find the truth. When you're just left to your own devices that don't even connect to Wi-Fi, then you're kind of screwed.
Yeah, and that's a lot of what the movie is trying to explore, right? Is like, what do people do when they don't have an idea of what to do? As somebody guiding them, somebody they can look to for more information. Like their best hope for figuring out what's going on is to like go talk to the prepper, because maybe the prepper is on top of this. But like it is, those elements of it are interesting, but like, as I was mentioning before, you never really get to explore the depths of their desperation. They by containing them to the house and kind of keeping it somewhat polite, like, I think you never really see like the consequence of their no information, right? Like I found it interesting. I found it interesting the way that they would get little tidbits, and then they'd find other tidbits that kind of mess with your perception before. And I think the whole idea of the information being intentionally misdirecting, the way that, there's the flyers that are in Arabic, and then there's the flyers that are in Korean or Mandarin, as Kevin Bacon doesn't really know. I think that is a cool idea, that like the search for information will only can only sometimes like make things more obfuscated. But I think that it gets to a certain point where it's like, okay, and now the world is changed as far as we know, and then it just sort of leaves you there. And I think when you are so focused on the internal dynamic of these characters, for the final sort of element to be so external doesn't really bring a sense of closure to the story. Even if like I didn't really find anything that happened to be like not interesting, right? It felt like the end of the second act and not the end of a third.
What would have been your take on the external? What was happening?
Well, so they mentioned that it's some sort of coup d'etat, and I don't know, and I think the dropping of the information of like the Russian officers or delegates or whatever it was that they pull out of the country is probably the most telling, given this movie's sort of general political perspective. There's some kind of like maybe Russian cyber attack that's trying to, present all this confusing misinformation. But I don't know. I don't know if I have like a code. I don't know if, because we are so removed and because the movie is partially about that misdirection of information, I don't know if there's like a clean takeaway to be had. I don't know if maybe the book that you read illuminates any more about that.
No. So, it's either external, right? Or it's internal, almost to a degree. Or they even kind of hit you with a third one. No one's in charge, which I do think has like a level of scariness. I don't think so. I think someone to some degree is still in charge in some capacity. I do think that it could be an outside force. When listening to the author discuss the book and how he was approaching it, he also kind of very much left it open to interpretation. He was very much focused on the characters. So he said that his editor thought it was like aliens. He's like, oh, it's aliens that have attacked and have caused this, rumblings to cause everybody to go in on themselves. He was, oh, okay, I definitely don't say it like that, but it's welcome. I'm like, oh, okay, so you really just don't have one. Then I kind of interview, he goes, I didn't have anything, so how could I just not answer that? And that's by doing everything possible to focus in on the characters and not focus in on that. And I think for a lot of people, if they come in at least wanting that satisfying answer, to some degree, I guess, of knowing what the demise was, I don't think it's rooted in there. That doesn't mean, though, that Sam Esmail didn't have his own. And that's where I personally think it's corporate America. Let me explain. I think it's corporate America because this is a guy who made all of Mr. Robot be about a hacker who was going to take down, through his cybersecurity ways, the big conglomerate that was in there. There are Easter eggs to that company in this movie.
Oh.
You see it in their devices.
So you're saying that if they did choose to return to New York City, they might have run into Rami Malek somewhere?
Maybe. Or just, in his universe of things, that was his way of almost implanting in there. I think it was all kind of internal. I think it was an implosion almost waiting to happen. I think that several countries also do hurt themselves so that they can tell daddy or mommy, my gosh, they hit me.
I mean, coup d'etat, right?
Easily.
Is this the political conflicts of our time reaching a point where they just blow themselves up? I mean, we it
That's
is
my take.
sort of, I can see that as well. And it's fascinating to see that sort of, imploding of civilization happen from this context. But I think where I feel a little bit let down by the movie is I either want that aspect of it to be clear or the personal aspect to be a little more consequential. And where the movie ultimately,
the characters,
the movie ultimately leaves us with, Ethan Hawke and Mahershala off doing some other adventure. Myha'la and Julia Roberts, staring down a bunch of deer, and then the kids sort of off on their own too. And it's, there's a conflict that happens towards the end of the movie where Mahershala and Kevin Bacon's character are pointing guns at each other. And it's not that I wanted that to get bloody or whatever, but it's kind of like Chekhov's gun element in that you're introducing this threat of danger and then nothing really happens.
Isn't that the knock at the beginning?
What is that?
Knock, knock in the middle of the night. I that's what I'm saying. I think the whole movie plays off of these preconceptions that we've had. And I think when they do it, like you're saying right here, for story elements that we know, that's when it's the most interesting. Sometimes it gets a little into, things that we've kind of seen a lot, and it feels like the characters are just creating tension just to create tension. But the Chekhov's gun of it, I think, is almost kind of the idea of like there was a knock. It ends up being a family who's a different color than them. Are they going to be dangerous? Actually, no. It's the complete inversion of what it's supposed to be.
True, and I'm not against a subversion in that way, but I think what it did is sort of left me feeling like who actually changed in this movie, right? Which character went on a journey? Maybe Julia Roberts became little bit. Maybe she became a little bit less suspicious of people. But like, they're small arcs, and it contrasted with what's going on in the movie. I don't know, and that all compounded upon the actual ending being the Friends DVD reveal or whatever it is. Kind of felt like a joke ending to me. Like
it was a joke ending.
I fast forwarded through the credits to see if there was another scene. You know, like I don't know. It just did. My reaction to the ending wasn't that's a funny reversal or whatever. It was just that's it. I was, yeah. It just didn't feel. It didn't feel like it was wrapping things up in a way, even if I thought a lot of it was really interesting.
Yeah.
Also, what's going on with the animals in this movie? Because if this is a cybersecurity attack, I don't know why that's affecting flamingos.
Well, they had the noise. That's the big thing. And in the book, there's just before the noise, there's after the noise. And that, I mean, there's the point with the kid, right? They kind of do the misdirection of, oh, he got hit by a tick, but he was so focused on his phone. Did that tick do something to him? Like, how can a noise affect this kid so much that his teeth start falling out?
Yeah.
Crazy effects work there, though. Like, that was... I don't know if you've ever had a dream of your teeth falling out, but, like, damn, now we got ourselves some HD footage. You've never had one?
No, I never had one.
I probably had one where, like, I fell and hit myself, but, like, that's going to lead me to having a dream. After seeing those visuals, like, damn, no, that was pretty bad. But it's supposed to be that screech. And to me, I took it as like, okay, so this screech is what's causing these animals to, like, mess up all their migration stuff. You got the deer coming in and the deer. I've heard a twofer on that. They mentioned in the movie seeing deer is a very good thing. Some people believe if you see deer, that means that they're in a place where they're protecting you. I've also am of the belief you see a deer run. So, I mean, it could go either way there. The flamingos, I went deep on this.
All right.
And I don't know if you're going to like this answer. And again, that's kind of my whole point for my breakdown of the movie is that I get it, but I'm also not agreeing that it's satisfying. I feel like I have an answer, but it doesn't mean it's satisfying.
Sure.
Well, you see, Zach, the author has a flamingo tattooed on his right arm. I kid you not. This man's like, it's very personal to me. I'm like, what? Okay, gotcha.
Cool. Dope.
Cool, great. I guess it's just that, the noise caused the animals to go upstate, downstate, wherever they were. I thought they were up north, and it turns out they were on Long Island.
Yeah, I mean, they have to be somewhere where, like, the skyline of New York City is visible, right? So
10 minutes out of Boston. Like Last of Us.
Exactly.
But I don't know. I mean, the ending for the three characters, I do think that they do wrap up thematically. You're not going to know, like, the characters what happened, but do they all have their own little story arcs that they go on? And I think the biggest push here is, like, I think they do. But I can't argue with you that it's not entertaining because they're not entertaining. Like, if it was a better family, it would be more interesting. But you got this middle-class family and what was supposed to be an elderly couple now being played by younger characters, right? Mm-hmm. I do think that when they go and they have that interaction, it's supposed to be this microcosm of, like, all right, now you got they're both neighbors, but you got the doomer, and then you got the more philanthropic, liberal black guy who realized he never really knew his neighbor, right? They got guns faced at them, and it isn't until this little speech where he's able to convince them to give him the money. But in that, there's that bit where he gives them cash, and they talk about it being bartering. He's like, well, no, it's still cash. It's like, well, no, it's bartering. I thought that was a good line.
Yeah,
I thought that was a clever way to say things have changed.
This is sort of the trouble of, like, trying to do film criticism in the middle, because, like, I thought from a beat by beat perspective, I really enjoyed a lot of elements of this.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
The disaster film elements were really strong. A lot of the dialogue is really sharp and really precise, and the characters are pretty well defined, even if I don't find them that deep. And I guess that's just sort of where I'm hitting my head with this movie is, like, I liked so much of what is going on. I just kind of wanted it to be a bit bigger, a bit more. I don't know what really the answer is to that, but maybe it was just a little too much misdirection ultimately with the stuff like the animals and the different elements.
If they wouldn't have focused on
woman speaking Spanish
another one, he was able to allow the couple who was rich enough to come in, even if they were black. But the moment he met a woman that he couldn't get anything out of, drives right past her. That's what I got out of it when I saw it. In the book, he kind of spells it out even more. He gets into this whole breakdown of morality. Are there even morals in an apocalyptic world? Don't you just make them up as you go? This idea of, like, the truth is only written by the people who win. And he also had that other excuse of, like, well, at least I can communicate with Mahershala, and he gave me $1,000. I don't know this lady. I can't listen to this lady. I don't understand this lady. Bye. And it's this idea of like what happens when you think you're a good guy in the apocalypse. You're just gonna let it all go. So I think within the characters, they're not interesting, but you do get to see bits and pieces of the boy who's so attached to his phone that he has to like be a creepo, right, in order to get any satisfaction because he's like addicted to whatever he's been watching. This girl is addicted to Friends, but she's also the one who understands like, yo, mom, I listen to West Wing only, or I watch West Wing only the Aaron Sorkin episodes. Again, they overwrote the characters in my opinion, because when she starts telling her mom that story, that parable about like the guy who was warned multiple times, they're practically telling you this is the one girl who does get it. And it's like the cheesiest way of like them telling you, you know what? The kid's got this. Okay? It's like you're critiquing her for only focusing in on the media that she consumes because that's her like getaway. But then at the same time, she's so smart that she's the only one recognizing. No one's paying attention to the girl who first saw the deer, right? Yeah. No one's paying attention to her when she's the one who, how did she even know to go to the bunker? Out of all the houses to go into, she just like...
Right. She picked that one.
I think it's trying to tell you that the kids are the future. Gen Z knows what they're doing, or Alpha, whatever we are at this point. But when she goes down to the basement, it's also like criticizing her in the sense of like, she just wants to know the ending of the series. Just like you want to know the ending of the series. And don't you realize that that's very childish? Focus on the dying world around you. And I'm like, what's the point of this? What's the point of this movie?
Yeah, and that's, I guess, where I come down on is that, like, there's just... Even though I think I'm still like a slight recommendation for this one, especially because it's on Netflix and that's like it's a very easy to like sit down and like work your way through. Even though it's a little bit long, I still think it's a pretty pleasant watch. Maybe pleasant's the wrong word, but I think it's a decently entertaining, captivating watch. I left myself wanting a little bit more and wishing there was something else there, But yeah, like I still think it's worth checking out. You know, it's got some fantastically charismatic actors. I don't know if there's one person whose performance in particular you liked. I enjoy seeing Julia Roberts in this mode. I think Sam Esmail does really know how to utilize her natural charm without making her particularly likable.
Yeah, because this is an unlikable character, and no one's argued about her being unlikable, as we usually see many times when a character can go all in, right? You know, bodies. Everyone complained about them all being unlikable. I'm like, but they got it down to a T. This person is also really unlikable. In the book, she's even worse. She says a lot of messed up stuff. But Julia just has that charm.
Yeah, and she is able to play like tightly wound suburban mom without going like full Karen in a caricature kind of way.
Yeah, so you can still kind of understand the viewpoint of where she's coming from. Right. And like you had mentioned, they had already worked together on Homecoming, and I never got to finish Gaslit. I saw like the first free episode that we got. No one's got stars, but they also worked with each other on that one. But I thought her and Mahershala Ali, in that scene that they had together, I was like, whoa. Hey,
yeah, I wasn't so sure about her. I wasn't so sure about her dance moves, but yeah, the chemistry.
No, it's terrible, absolutely horrendous. Even in the apocalypse, it's the scariest part. But
very jerky.
I thought them two together were really good. It was interesting. I had read that Denzel Washington was going to originally be in the movie, and then he dropped out. And I think maybe that's why they had to change the ages of the characters, because I guess he would have been a little bit older, and maybe they had a counterpart for him that would have made them the older couple. But what's interesting is in the book, they call Mahershala's character Denzel. You look like Denzel, which again is supposed to be a bit in the book, but I also found that interesting. Even more fascinating is that they bring up Obama twice in the movie, or in the book, and how Clay doesn't like the Obama administration. So this man put it on his book of the year, and then became producer on it. Yeah. All I need to know at the end is I need to know what those script notes were.
I mean, they kept that part out of the movie adaptation.
Of course they did.
Also, very funny that Julia Roberts' daughter is so obsessed with Friends and not at one point doesn't ask, hey, Mom, were you on Friends in the first couple of seasons dating Chandler?
You know what? The thing is that Julia Roberts already has the perfect out because of Ocean's 12. Because of that bit that they did. You know what I'm talking about. Yeah. Where they had her play Julia Roberts, even though she wasn't Julia Roberts.
One of the great cameo bits of all time, yeah.
Clean pass for her. You don't got to explain it here, Sam. I got you.
So you sound like you're also on a slight recommendation for this movie too.
It's interesting, you know.
Yeah.
I now understand why the Obamas call their thing higher ground. I think that there's enough in there to pick apart and connect things, and I'm sure people are going to pick out a bunch of other things that are in the movie, you know, with the production design, with what the characters say to each other. I think there's some interesting aspects to when the characters, you know, hide something from each other. Oh, did you see a plane fall? No, I didn't. Don't tell my daughter that because we think our wife is still on a plane. You know, they're really good actors. I just think that the direction wasn't there to really push them to the next level, and thank God he got this cast, because a worse cast would have been horrendous.
Yeah,
but you got some of the best players out there, and for that I think it's interesting. The movements of the camera were a little too much to me. If you want a very long shot and you're trying to get it wide, shoot an IMAX, my G. Like I can't keep doing this the entire movie. That was a little disorienting for me, but overall, I think I'll revisit it again in the future.
Yeah, I'm curious to see what more people think about it, because I think there's a lot of stuff that's very interesting in there, and I still am interested in Sam Esmail's work. I find it to be like distinct and have a really interesting perspective that feels modern. Like he feels like he's not looking backwards with his movies. He is really trying to look at like what are the new conflicts, and it's cool even if I don't know if I 100% vibe with the execution here.
Makes sense.
All right, so I think those are most of our thoughts on Leave the World Behind. Let us know what you thought about the movie. But that's about it for this edition of After Credits on Intercut. You can catch more from me, Zach Shevich, by following me on Twitter, Instagram, or Letterboxd at ZShevich, ZSHEVICH, and check out my YouTube or TikTok channels at Multiplex Show. Arturo, where can people find more from you?
You can find me over at LME Movies on all social media, as well as youtube.com at Let Me Explain, where you can send us a copy of Friends if you have it, in case everything goes to crap. Or you can find me every week here on the Intercut podcast. This girl had HBO Max, whatever it was when she had it on her app. Download
she had
the episode.
Netflix in the 2 years ago when they still had the rights.
Right? I like that thing at the end, right, when she had the remote and it's right over Netflix. I like that, Esmail. More of that. She should have downloaded the episode, though.
Yeah. Right. You totally can. I mean, I don't know how to, but I think you can.
So what?
You can listen to every episode of the Intercut podcast on iTunes, Anchor, Spotify, whatever your favorite podcatcher is. I like Overcast, and then make sure you're subscribed not just to the audio, but to the video as well on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/intercutpod, where you can catch our riveted faces as we run through the latest in entertainment. Find new episodes of the Intercut Weekend Must Watch streaming on our YouTube channel every Monday. And please leave us a comment, like the video. Consider heading over to iTunes or Spotify to give us that much requested 5-star review. It does a lot to help our channel. Like our social media feeds, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, even on Patreon. You can find us at Intercut Pod, and you can get updates throughout the week from Art, from me, from all the guests we feature here on Intercut. You can also check out a link to our Discord in the description of this episode. Thanks again for tuning in, and until next time, I fucking hate people.
Great line.